Hi guys, this is Mohan. Welcome to exception handling interview questions. What is exception? Guys, this is very straightforward question. An exception is an event that disproves the normal flow of the program. It is an object which is thrown at runtime. Let me open my code, guys. I have something here, int k is equal to 12 by 0. Guys, I am not handling anything here, just I have a piece of code. Remaining code. And start. Now I am executing the code, guys. See, it is printing start, which means it is executing line number 4, and at line number 5 it is your JVM is executing 12 by 0. It is infinite, so it is throwing arithmetic exception. Since you are not handling, then your remaining code will not be executed. So this is called exception, guys. There are many scenarios. Just here I am explaining you only one scenario. Whenever this kind of disputes are happening, then that will disturb your normal flow of the application. So that is nothing but an exception. An exception is an event that disputes the normal flow of the program. It is an object which is thrown at runtime. What is exception handling? It is a mechanism to handle exceptions and to maintain the normal flow of the application. Guys, if you handle here, just I am wrapping the code inside of try block and followed by a catch block. Means I am handling this exception. Why I am handling this exception? I don't want my code to break. I want my remaining code also will be executed, though the exception occurred here. Let me execute, guys. As you can see, it is executing start and it is printing the exception details, and my remaining code also will be executed. Why? Because I am handling the exception here. That is nothing but exception handling, guys. What is exception handling? It is a mechanism to handle exceptions and to maintain the normal flow of the application. What is the difference between checked exception and unchecked exception? Guys, first let us see the definitions. Checked exceptions: the classes that extend exception class except runtime exception are known as checked exceptions. Examples: IO exception, SQL exception, etc. Checked exceptions are checked at compile time. Unchecked are runtime exceptions. The classes that extends runtime exception class are known as unchecked exceptions. Example: arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, etc. Unchecked exceptions are not checked at compile time. Guys, let me show you this. This is the hierarchy, guys. The root class is throwable. Error exceptions are two subclasses. I am not worrying about error at this stage. It is not related to this. SQL exception, IO exception, interrupted exception, class not found, file not found, etc., etc., and runtime exception. All these classes are all these classes, guys. Exception, SQL exception, IO exception, and so on. are checked exceptions, which means all subclasses of exception class except runtime exception class are known as checked exceptions and are compile time exceptions. These exceptions developer has to handle during compile time, otherwise compiler won't allow developer to take the build. Next one, null pointer exception, arithmetic exception, number format exception, etc. etc. All the subclasses of runtime exception class are known as runtime exceptions or unchecked exceptions. Next one, guys, what is the base class for error and exception? Base class means superclass, guys. Exception and error both are derived from throwable. Throwable is a root class for entire exception hierarchy. Is it necessary that each try block must be followed by a catch block? No, guys. Either try followed by catch or try followed by finally. Both are allowed. See, guys. But try alone you can't use. Final alone you can't use. Even try alone you can't use. But try followed by catch and or try followed by finally, either one is okay. So try catch combination is not mandatory. Is it necessary that each try block must be followed by a catch block? It is not necessary that each try block must be followed by a catch block. It should be followed by either a catch block or finally block. What is finally block? Finally block is a block which is always executed. Guys, whenever you want to execute one piece of code under all the circumstances, which means when exception occurred or there is no exception and exception occurred and you are not handling, then there is an exception you are handling, all these scenarios your finally block will be executed. So generally finally block, where finally block is prepared is if you want, must and should execute some code. Let us suppose I am establishing the connection to the database. If my code is terminating for some reason, I want to close the connection to the database so that others can utilize the connection full. So is such to write such kind of code, we will use finally block. Can finally block be used without catch? Yes, guys. You can use try followed by catch or try followed by finally blocks. Is there any case when finally will not be executed? Guys, there are two scenarios where finally block also will not be executed. One is system.exit. Let me show you, guys. See here, if there is an exception occurred, then your finally block will be executed. If there is no exception, but of course finally block will be executed. But if there is a system.exit, whenever JVM encounters this system.exit code, let us see, guys. Now if I execute this, execution will start from main method. It will execute start, it will enter into try, it will execute system.exit. Guys, whenever JVM encounters system.exit, then and there it will terminate your code. It doesn't matter what is there behind, what is there after that. See, executing start and terminating. Suppose let me keep this code in finally block. Now see the answer here. So it is executing start and it is throwing the exception. It will go to finally, it will execute this, then it will execute this, then it is terminating. It will not execute the rest of the statements. Guys, whenever JVM encounters system.exit of 0, it will then and there it will terminate the code. It may be in try block, it may be outside the try block, it may be in catch block, it may be outside the catch block, inside the finally block also. And one more scenario where your finally block will be terminated is fatal error. Whenever the server, this is related to server guys, I cannot explain you through code. Can an exception be rethrown? Answer is yes. How it is guys, I have void m1 wherein I have a try catch blocks and try is throwing some exception. It will go to catch I'm printing something and I'm throwing this. Who has to handle this? The caller of m1. Who is the caller of m1? Obviously that is m1. Instead of a try block, I'm calling m1. So this will handle it. So here the concept is, this is throwing the exception and it will enter into the catch block. Can your catch block rethrown the exception? Yes. Right, guys, I am trying to run this in debug mode. See this guys, it is entering into a try block and here it is calling m1. It will go inside of m1. System.out.println of m1, it is printing this. Now int k is equal to 12 by 0, it will throw the arithmetic exception and this catch will catch that exception. It will go inside, then it is printing this. Now you are rethrowing, throw AG. Throw to what? Caller. Who is the caller? Main method. Then it will catch it. Then it will go and here this catch will handle the exception. This is what exception rethrown guys. Can subclass overriding method declare an exception if parent class method doesn't throw the exception? Let me explain you through example. This is the example guys. Now the question is, I have class A and in which I have m1. I am extending class B extends class A and I am overriding this method. Now if this is not throwing the exception, can we throw the exception here? Yes, you can. You can declare throws, but you can declare only unchecked exceptions. Can declare the exception, but that should be a runtime exception. You can't throw IO exception because IO exception is checked exception guys. You can't throw it. Whenever superclass method is not declared the exception, subclass method you can override as is, or if you want to throw, you can throw the unchecked exceptions, but you cannot throw the checked exceptions. Now this is not something related to the question, guys. I'm just explaining here. Suppose if superclass method declares exception, superclass method declares exception, then what we can do with subclass? We can define the subclass overridden method without declaring the exception, or as is always possible, then arithmetic exception mean subclass exception. Arithmetic exception is subclass of runtime exception. Let me show you guys this one. Arithmetic exception is subclass of runtime exception. So this is always possible, but you cannot throw the superclass exception. You cannot declare superclass exception. Means whenever the superclass method throws an exception, subclass method cannot declare the superclass, but it can declare the subclass. Suppose see, this superclass method is declaring this exception. Subclass method can declare this and so on, but it cannot declare exception. It cannot declare throwable. What is exception propagation? Guys, exception propagation is nothing but, suppose I have an exception I'm throwing the exception in class M1. If M2 has to handle it. If this is not handling, then the caller is M2. The caller is M3. Then caller has to handle it. This is nothing but a exception propagation. It is throwing the exception class to the caller. Who is the caller in this case for M1? M2. And M2 has to handle it. If M2 is not handling, it will throw the exception class to its caller, that is M3. So throwing from one method to another method is known as exception propagation. Forwarding the exception object to the invoking method is known as exception propagation. Guys, this is very important interview question. What is the difference between throw and throws? What is the difference between throw and throws? Now see the differences, guys. Throw is used explicitly throw an exception. Throws is used to declare an exception. This one, guys, I'm passing age here. If age is less than 18, I'm explicitly throwing new arithmetic exception. You're explicitly throwing the new arithmetic exception. So throw is used to throw the exception explicitly, and throws is used declare the exceptions. Declare the exceptions meaning that, hey, my code may throw this exception, arithmetic exception. So the caller will alert and they will handle this kind of exceptions in their code and make sure that their code will not break. That is the first difference. Throw is used to explicitly throw an exception. Throws is used to declare an exception. Next one. Checked exceptions cannot be propagated with throw only. And unchecked exceptions can be propagated. Sorry guys, this is unchecked. Unchecked exceptions can be propagated with throws only. Guys, if you see here, in previous case, we didn't declare the exception. Declaring runtime or unchecked exceptions is not mandatory in Java. So I'm throwing the new arithmetic exception. So it will go, who will handle this? M2. If not, M3. So this exception propagation, that is unchecked exception propagation, you can do using only throw keyword. Throws keyword is not required here. Suppose I am declaring here IO exception. IO exception. Guys, IO exception, as we know, this is checked exception, right? So checked exception, you cannot just throw it. You have to declare the exception as well. Whenever there is a piece of code where whether you are explicitly throwing the exception or that code may generate the checked exception, that exception you need to declare. Let me repeat, guys. Whenever your code throwing the exception explicitly or generating exception because of code logic, you have to declare that exception if it is a checked exception. If it is not checked exception, then declaring is not mandatory. Suppose here you are declaring exception, you are throwing IO exception. Then who has to handle it? Your M group caller has to handle it. If it is not handling, at least it has to declare. This is what, guys. Unchecked exception propagation is not possible only by using throw. Throws together we have to use. So unchecked exception can be propagated with throws keyword only, but checked exception cannot be propagated with only throw keyword. Next, throw is followed by an instance. Throws is followed by class. Guys, see this? Whenever you're throwing the exception, throws IO exception. What is IO exception? It is a class. Throws arithmetic exception. What is arithmetic exception? It is a class. But when you throw exception explicitly, you're not throwing a class. Throw new IO exception, which means you're creating the object of IO exception and you're throwing. That means throws is followed by class. Throw is followed by instance, that is object. Next one. Throw is used within the method. Throws is used with the signature of the method. Let us see, guys. See, where are you using throw? Why are you using throw? Throw is used to throw the exception explicitly with some logic. If this condition satisfies, throw new arithmetic exception. Where do you write the code? Within the method. So throw always you will use within the method, but throws along with method signature. Last one, you cannot throw multiple exceptions, but you can declare multiple exceptions. Guys, if my code, if I feel that this code will throw the multiple exceptions, yes, you can declare the exceptions. Throws IO exception, arithmetic exception. But when you're throw new IO exception, you cannot throw multiple exceptions like throw new IO exception, comma, arithmetic exception, etc. That is not possible. Let me repeat, guys. You can declare multiple exceptions using throws keyword, throws IO exception, throws arithmetic exception, etc. But you can throw only one exception. That's all, guys, the differences. Now we are going to see the output of few example codes, guys. Kindly pause the screen and guess the output. Sorry, guys, just a minute. Please pause your screen and guess the output, then come back and compare with my answer. Guys, this is the code and they will ask what is the output of this code. Guys, be careful, in written exams you will get always something like that, some piece of code they will just copy paste and they will ask you what is the output of this. As we all know, the main method is the starting point, public static void main, and it will enter into try block. It will enter into try block. It will enter into try block and it will invoke M1. Then what is there in M1? M1 is throw new runtime exception. Then it will go here, runtime exception, then it will not execute other statements. Guys, whenever there is an exception, it will never execute the other statements. So it will not execute this. Then it will come to catch block. What is the exception thrown here? runtime exception. So obviously this will handle this catch block. Then once one catch block is executed, it will not execute the other catch blocks. Then it will go to finally block D and your remaining code will be executed. Let me show you that, guys. This is the code, guys. I will execute this in debug mode. Guys, this is my main method, public static void main entering into try block, and this is executing the method m, and it will go inside of method m. Then it is throwing runtime exception. It is also executing the statement line number 6. It will go to corresponding catch block. What is the corresponding catch block? Runtime exception. It will execute that. It will execute that. It will not execute the catch block. Then it will go to finally block. Finally block will be executed. Since you are handling the exception, it will execute rest of the code, that is D. So answer is B, D, E. Guys, let me explain once again. It will start from main method. It will go to try block. It will invoke M1. M1 is throwing new runtime exception. Then it will not execute rest of the statements whatever you have here, and the corresponding catch block will handle the exception, which means this code will be executed. Then once one catch block will be executed and other catch blocks, it will skip it. Then your finally block will be executed. Since you are handling the exception, your rest of the code will be executed. So the answer is B, D, E. Guys, let's see this code. I have a main method, try int x is equal to 0, int y is equal to 5 by x, catch exception and something, catch runtime exception. Guys, please pause the screen and guess the output. Guys, this is something related to multiple exceptions. When you are handling multiple exceptions, you will keep multiple catch blocks here. And whenever you are using multiple catch blocks, most specific exception should come first, then generic exception. But in this case, runtime exception is the subclass of exception. So this should come first. First runtime exception, then exception, it will compile. But in this case, it is reverse. See, it is always throwing the compile time exception, because all the exceptions including runtime exception will be handled by exception class. So this never ever be executed. This is unreachable code, unreachable catch block. For runtime exception, it is already handled by the catch block of exception. Or otherwise, if you keep like this, first subclass, then superclass, then it will go for compilation. Guys, whenever you're writing multiple catch blocks, more specific should come first, then more generic. So what is the answer here? Compilation phase. Guys, next one is, I have a main method in which I have try finally. Can you guess what is the output, guys? Try block, I have only one statement, return. Ideally, whenever you write the return statement, then and there it will return. Your JVM will return from there, means which will not execute any other statements. But since you put the finally block here, finally block always will be executed. So before returning the cursor from here, it will execute your finally block. Let me show you guys. So this is the code. In my main method I have try, and finally in try I have return statements. Now I am running in debug mode. Guys, see this? It is try, it is returning, then but it will go to finally, it will execute finally. See, answer is finally. Next one, look at this, guys. I have a main method in which try block. From try I am invoking another method followed by catch and some remaining code. What is there in main method? My method I have a try and finally. Try is throwing the new exception. So let me show you this one, guys. This is my code. So when you start executing, your JVM will execute try, it will go to my method, it will go inside of my method. What is there in inside of my method? Try block. In try, throw new exception, then it will throw the new exception. Before terminating this method, it will execute finally. Correct? So A. Then since it is executing, it is throwing the exception, do you have catch block to handle that? Yes, it will come and execute this. Since you are handling, your rest of the code will be executed. What is the answer? A, B, C. Let me debug this code. So it is calling my method, throw new exception. Before terminating, it will go to finally block, it will execute it, A, and then it will come to catch block, it will execute catch block. Since you are handling the exception here, it will go and execute the rest of the code. That is ABC. Now this is the code, guys. Just pass the screen and analyze the output and come to the code. Let me show you. This is the code, guys. I have a main method and try block, catch block, finally, and remaining code. From try block, I am calling another method where I am throwing the new arithmetic exception. Guys, see this? When I am executing this, JVM will enter into try block. It will execute this and it will go to and call the main method. Sorry, my method. What is there in my method? One print statement, and it will throw new arithmetic exception. It will come here. Are you handling the exception, guys? Yes, this try catch block will handle the arithmetic exception. Exception catch block will handle all the subclass exceptions. Since arithmetic exception is subclass of catch exception, it will handle. Since you are handling, your final block will be executed and your remaining code also will be executed. Let me show you, guys. So this is enter into try block. It will print B. It will call my method. It will go and execute line number 4, print A. Then it will throw new arithmetic exception, and you are handling the exception. So it will print C. it will go to finally block, print D, then it will execute the remaining code. So it will print B, C. Next one, this is my code, guys. Guys, this is public static void main string here. This is the starting point. It will go to try block. It will call my method. Inside my, it will go and invoke this. Inside my method, what are you doing? You are throwing new error. Are you handling the? Will exception catch block will handle error? No, guys. Let me show you this. Exception handling. See this, guys. Exception and error both are parallel. One is not superclass of another. So exceptions are different, errors are different. So you're throwing it, what you're throwing is error, and what you're handling is exception, which means whatever you're throwing here, you're not handling it. So it will break it. Before breaking, it will print finally block, because finally block will be executed under all circumstances whenever there is an exception and not handled, or handled when there is no exception. All these scenarios it will be handled. So in this case, it will print only this and it will throw the exception. Let me execute this, guys. My method, see, throw new error, directly it will come to finally block. I mean, it is executing C, then it is throwing the exception. That's it. See, it is printing C and it is throwing the error. Guys, I'm going to keep here throwable. Can you guess what is the output now? See this? B, C, D. Why is that? Let me debug this. Guys, it is starting from main method. It is calling my method. It will go to my method. There it is throwing new error. Then it will come to catch. Is this catch block catching this exception and handling it? Yes, because error is subclass of throwable. Guys, superclass can handle all subclass exceptions. Throwable can handle the error as well as exception. All these subclasses, exceptions, if you keep throwable in catch block, it will take care of everything. So you are handling the exception here, and it is print this B, then it will go to finally. Since you are handling the exceptions, it will execute the remaining code as well. So here C is printed before exiting an error message. What method of an exception object returns a message string? Guys, this is very important question in exception handling. Should be careful. See this. I have let me do some more small modifications, guys. Guys, look at this code. I have a try block wherein it will throw the arithmetic exception. I am coming to the catch block. Then this is the catch block which is handle this exception. So here I have some methods. See this? get message. These are all methods defined in throwable, guys. If you call get message, it will simply return the error message. If you call print stack trace, it will print total stack trace. So in this case, the question is, what method of an exception object returns a message string? That is get error, get message, print stack trace. This is the get message. Get message will return the message, error message, exception message. What method of an exception object prints a list of methods that were called before the exception was thrown? Guys, this is typical question here. Let me open the exception propagation code. Guys, if you print just here, instead of print stack trace, if you go for e dot get message, it will just return the message, error message. I don't want that. What I want is, I want to know complete stack trace. Then keep print stack trace method. Print stack trace method. Guys, see this? This print stack trace will give you all the details. This is the class, this is the method, main method, exception propagation class. Line number 16. Line number 16 is the first one where it is throwing the exception. But line number 16, what are you doing? You are invoking M2, where line number 11. Line number method M2 is invoking M1. At which line? Line number 8. And M1 is the actual culprit where we are throwing the exception, or it is generating the exception. That is line number 4 of this class of M1 method. It will give you all the methods where it is exception, I mean entire hierarchy. What is that method? Print stack trace. C is the answer. What happened during execution if a negative value is used for an array index? Guys, here the question is, I have an array this one. This is my array, guys. I am trying to retrieve negative value. Guys, as we all know that arrays will start from 0th index. When we define int a is equal to 2, 4, 6, 7, at a of 0, 2, a of 1, 4, a of 2, 6, a of 3, 7. When I am trying to retrieve the element which is present at -1 or -2, since there is no element present here, it will throw the array index out of bounds exception. Whenever you pass the negative value to an array, what happened during execution if a negative value is used for an array index? Negative value used, it will throw the array index out of bounds exception. Array index, sorry guys, this is typo. Array index out of bounds exception. Array index out of bounds exception. That's all guys. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends if you like it. Thank you so much.